episode 208. Ultraman Israel with the overall winner and my friend Amy VT.
Welcome to the pursuit of the perfect race. I'm Coach Terry Wilson, and with each episode, I bring stories of athletes to you that share their experiences at races in order for you to learn how to have your perfect race. We will hear stories from athletes of all ages, abilities, and races of all distances. So regardless of where you fit in, there's something in there for you. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now let the pursuit begin. Hey everybody, welcome back to the pursuit of the perfect race. Today I have the pleasure of talking to my dear friend Amy VT about her recent race at Ultraman Israel. This took place over 3 days from November 13th to November 16th in Israel. It's a little bit different than Ironman branded races, and at this race she actually won the overall division with 28 hours 17 seconds. She's ready to share her story about her race. Welcome back to the show, Amy.
Thank you very much, Terry.
Awesome. So I'm glad to have you back on here to dive into this interesting race. It's a lot different than all these other races that I've talked about. So what was this like registering for this race?
Registering was a hoot because I didn't really have to register. I was invited. And so basically I had no plans on doing an Ultraman this year. But then an invitation to the Middle East is a lifetime experience that I knew I couldn't surpass. So basically overnight I went from maybe never even planning to do an Ultraman again to thinking, okay, in 2 months I'll be doing an Ultraman again, and in Israel. It was really exciting.
Wow. And this was like a month right after Louisville, which was a nightmare of a race.
Yeah.
So how was your training going into this race?
Other Ultramans, the whole entire year before the race was designed to lead up to it. And usually the month before is just so voluminous that you can't race anywhere around it just because you're doing all these huge rides and runs. So this was unorthodox, to say the least. I found out I was doing the race in late August. And so my coach and I basically had to put together a quick and dirty plan to build some mega volume in just a couple months. So I definitely had to step into gear.
Wow. So going into your training, I mean, we're not going to talk about all the life-work balance here like we have in previous episodes. I mean, this is so unique that we'll just dive right into the fun stuff. What kind of workouts did you want to have under your belt before you got to the race start line?
That's a great question. The first year I did an Ultraman, I had no idea, and my coach learned a lot. And this time I felt a little bit more seasoned. What I tell people is it's essentially Ironman training only. You have roughly 3 mega long distance rides and roughly 3 mega long distance runs. That's pretty much it.
Okay. And for those that don't understand the dynamics of this platform, it's 3 days and you have different events each day. Walk me through that. I know the first day is a 10K swim. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And 100 and this is where I'm going to mess up.
Not talking kilometers.
Yeah, it's 145K, which is like 7.
It's roughly a 90-mile.
Okay. And then day 2 is how long is the bike?
Roughly 170 miles.
And then day 3 is the long run. So going into this race, how did you anticipate your travel, getting over there, your bike, rental car? Well, I don't know if y'all got a rental motorcycle.
Logistical planning was a little bit different for this one. My other couple were in Canada where we just drove across the border. The biggest thing for me, since I was working with the Israel Department of Ministry, who were so kind and such wonderful shepherds and introducers of this country and wonderful territory, that coordinating with travel, it was important for me to get there as early as possible to acclimate to the time change. Time change has affected me before, and this one was going to be a 10-hour time change. And so I wanted to get there well over a week in advance. So I did that, and that wasn't too much. It definitely took a while to get my sleep adjusted and get the logistics set up. The key was we rented a car the entire time.
Okay.
Entirely necessary because that also became the support vehicle.
Right, because this is all self-supported for the most part.
Yes.
I mean, the course is marked on the run, but you still have to have your support crewing for you.
The entire time. All 4 legs. Yes.
Wow. So Chris had to get a canoe. He had to know the route and then go ahead of you. Hopefully you don't need a flat change, which I know you did a few times.
Yeah.
So as far as your flights going over there, where did you fly to and where were your stops?
So exciting. We showed up at Portland Airport and they said, okay, we just need to see your visas. And we said, well, we don't have visas. And they said, you can't fly through Turkey if you don't, because we were flying through Istanbul. Fortunately, we got out of that. They just said the airport. But we flew to Istanbul and then to Tel Aviv to get out there. When we showed up at Tel Aviv, it was late at night and we didn't have our bikes. And so that was tough. It was middle of the night trying to navigate a very large city and they didn't have our bicycles. And it was pretty tough. We just had our little carry-on bags. So the first few days we actually didn't have our bike bags that had all of our gear too. So we were jet lagged. So it was a really tough first few days in Tel Aviv. But all the more reason I wanted to get there early, because after a couple days we got everything.
How long was it before you actually got your?
Couple days, 2.5 days.
Wow. Did they deliver it to your hotel? Did you have to go pick it up?
Yep. They delivered it to us. Thank goodness. A little beat up, but everything.
A little beat up?
Yeah, just the bags were low. We travel with soft bags and everything was kind of disheveled in there and on the outside, but bikes worked. We got everything together. And again, all the more reason I love to show up super early.
Was anything broken on the bike?
No, not yet. Not from travel. Soon.
So did you really taper it all into this race?
No, there's just kind of like no taper Ultraman. I mean, you don't do the volume a week or two before, but since you don't need that much sharpness for Ultraman, a taper to preserve your muscles isn't as important. And again, I also was rushing my volume training, so that pushed everything back anyway. So the taper coincided with arriving in Israel and getting used to the time change.
So knowing that you're rushing the volume here over 2 months where you didn't really know that you were doing this, you obviously had a full on your agenda for Louisville, and I could anticipate your volume being around 20, 25 hours, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, and that was always a hard call. How much do I prioritize Louisville and try to do a classic Ironman train and taper for Louisville, which would cut in to the volume for Ultraman. And so in the end of the day, my coach and I decided if I'm going to do Ultraman, I have to do them. So it was not ideal training for Louisville, but I was already registered. It would certainly be good training also for Ultraman. The joke was that if I finished, which I didn't in Louisville, that I should keep running through the finish line at another marathon to the end, but didn't work out that way. And I did not finish Louisville because of inclement weather, and that worked out fine because then I didn't have to recover from that either. And I just went right back into, I think, a very long run just a couple days after.
Just take a day or two to recover, then you go back out.
Didn't even need to recover because I only got through those swimming bike bill. So it was like a blip. Yeah.
Wow. So as far as your day-to-day nutrition goes, I know you're only at 112 pounds here at 5'7", so you don't really weigh much, but are you doing anything to make sure you're eating enough throughout every day?
Yeah, I always do. Breakfast is always something I'm not a pair out, and I keep struggling because I don't like to wake up and eat a big breakfast. But Coach and I are working on that, and I think everybody should. And so that was one that I pay particular attention to going into Ultraman, just because you have to get your stomach so used to packing it in and early in the day, that I would do that. And then the biggest key, and my husband, Chris, is a coach as well. And I think he avers that the majority of his athletes struggle with this. The key is, especially with Ultraman, you have to practice your race nutrition during your training. Because so many people, I believe, will train and they're not going to pack Gatorade. They're not going to take gels and, they'll just kind of wing it or constrain themselves. Whereas, especially for Ultraman, you've got to steel your stomach for loading into calories. And so I did that a little bit more this past fall.
Okay. Well, what about with just the day-to-day nutrition aspect? Are you trying to, even with Ironman training, you have to get a certain amount of calories every day just to make sure you're using everything, not eating into your muscle where you start eating like rhabdo or anything like that.
Not a problem for me. I eat a lot. I eat a lot. My only problem is I could eat fat all day. And I used to think that was a problem. Recently, there has been some camps saying, no, we all need fat too. And I know some elite athletes who thrive off of it too. One of my sponsors is Creminelli Fine Meats. And they purvey some really high quality, meat product and cheese. And I live off of that stuff. I thrive on it. And when you're doing long distance, there is some argument that some of those healthy fats also should play a big part in your daily diet. I eat a lot of calories per day. A lot of it is fat. And so the only thing I work on is trying to remember breakfast and trying to remember some fruits and vegetables.
Wow. So I know you're doing the swim, bike, and the run workouts on a general basis and increasing that volume. Were you doing anything to prevent injury, like strength training?
A lot of people say there's just no time for that. There wasn't a lot of time for that. So what I made sure to prioritize was physical fitness.
Really?
I had a couple, or at least more like modified strength training that's more on a kin stretch or FRC type of thing where I'm ensuring that the two potential injuries I know that I could get are coddled and taken care of because, I've got something in my knee, something in my hip. A 52-mile run is not conducive to a hip that might flare up now and again. And so I prioritized more of the kin stretch PT stretching regimen.
Wow. So what does that look like?
Totally specified to my injury. My husband also runs a kin stretch class that looks like a lot of holding stretches and doing some active stuff to fire up. I don't know the vernacular, but to fire up the different muscles, and basically is like really intensive yoga. If yoga is passive, this is more active. I really enjoyed it, and I stayed injury free, which I attribute to that regimen.
Wow. What's the name of that?
Kin stretch. Kinetic stretching. I'm a convert.
Wow. So let's see here. So you started traveling 2 weeks out. We'll just skip all the other stuff we've covered in previous episodes so we can just get in. So whenever you first got there to Tel Aviv, is that how you say it?
Yeah.
What was your very first impression when you got out of the airport of the community, the atmosphere around you?
It's like you feel like you're going to the Middle East, and I saw pictures of the run course and other parts of the country, and it's like Mars. It's like desert. There could be camels, and so I kept forgetting into Tel Aviv, it's a major international city. There were skyscrapers. This is a huge city. And so my overwhelm would be the same as if we landed in Manhattan or LA or Tokyo.
Wow.
Just here we are in a major metropolis. And so the first several days we had to remember that we weren't tourists. Yeah, we were tourists, but we couldn't, do sightseeing. We really had to settle in, prioritize sleep, do some training, and just stay really healthy the first couple days. So that's.
So I know this is in the Middle East and you're a female going over there. Did you see any gender issues that you needed to dress a certain way, have something over your arms, legs, or anything like this?
I did in one place. Because it was Israel, I had to learn this as well. Is that a lot of the surrounding countries where Islam and Muslim women, their practice is covering. The most conservative religious culture in Israel are Orthodox Jews or Hasidic, and that does not involve. However, in the oldest city, Jerusalem, I mean, Tel Aviv is it's like San Francisco. You could wear a thong bikini. I don't care. That actually happens. But then Jerusalem, 2 hours away, is one of the most conservative cities and oldest in the world. And that's where some religions intersect. And there were Muslim faith, Islam, Hindu, and Catholic, and Orthodox Jewish practitioners in the city. So when I went to some sites like the Wailing Wall, you do have to cover up, and I had to get something to cover just my legs.
Wow. So how did you know what to wear in different locations then?
At that point, I had a tour guide. This was after the race, and he was our official from the Department of Ministry tour guide, and so he instructed me on what to do.
That's pretty cool.
Very cool,
man. So I know I saw your Instagram stories that you were posting up about Israel and all the food, the buffets, and all this. What was this like for you, experiencing this and eating this food? Were you kind of worried about it at first?
Not at all. It was so. I just could. I even started the falafel where we went because I was so excited to learn about and test out the cuisine. I gotta say, friends and the scenery, the food was the best part of the whole trip.
Really,
and it's sticking with me and us. I'm still eating hummus every day.
Wow.
Eggplant. I mean, that was one absolute heights of the trip.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, as far as getting from Tel Aviv to the race venue to check in and all that, when was check-in? What was this experience like checking in?
So cool. Different. I've noticed that a lot of the racers over there aren't as hyper about getting places early, elaborate check-in, and preparing themselves. I am the only one who wanted to get to the hostel where we were staying, where the swim was, a full day early. So I was the only one there a full day. We kind of puddle jumped over there. So we were in Tel Aviv, then we drove up to a surf town called Haifa for the days, maybe 4 or 5 days in between. Because that was less urban and there was great open water swimming. And it's a surf town. Then we drove over to the race site in the middle of the country where the Sea of Galilee is and stayed at this really cool hostel and got there early. So the night of the race, everyone showed up. And my favorite part of any Ultraman began at that point, which is unlike Ironman, it's not even comparable. At Ultraman, you see all of your competitors and their families all in one. We can fit in one space because there are only 30 of us. And you see them and sit down with them for dinners and breakfasts for 4 or 5 days. And so I couldn't wait for everyone to show up because I know from years past that you might not know them the first day they show up, but in 4 days, you're going to know them so well. I feel fondness for them. So when everyone started to show up at the hostel, I started to get really excited. And they did an awesome job. It's like they turned the hostel into this registration site with banners and arches and had great meetings. They had a meeting in English for us, and it was really welcoming.
Wow. So the swim was going to take place in the Sea of Galilee. What was this like swimming there? Because, I mean, this has a lot of history to it. It's known around the world. Yeah. What was this like?
That was the craziest part. I mean, it's just kind of like, this is the Sea of Galilee. Jesus walked here. The way, other than just knowing that was the site, that's the name of it, the way that it palpably, we were affected and it stayed with us is that there were pilgrim boats out on the lake. For most of the time, it was just these boats with pilgrims visiting the lake, and they were playing music or praying or just tooling around, touching the water. And then looking all around up into the hills on every side, you just saw these huge churches, and they're ruins or temples, and they're really famous ones. And it was wild. It was like someone took out a page of an Old Testament coloring book for a kid, and we were in the middle of it.
Wow. So whenever I know you actually tried to walk on the water. It was kind of funny seeing that. No, not quite. So whenever you actually saw the Sea of Galilee the first time, were you like in awe just because of all the historic preservation of it?
Yeah, and it had begun more then, because when we were driving there, there's signs. And Chris rode there. I drove. He had a long ride, so he rode there from the coast. But you see these signs for, Jericho and Jerusalem and Bethlehem and Nazareth. You go right by Nazareth. And so it had already begun of like, these are the names I remember from Sunday school, It was pretty wild.
Wow, that is so awesome. So other than the travel and getting there to check-in, what all did you actually have to do at the check-in?
It was a lot like a classic Ireland check-in, only figure that there are only roughly us. So it makes it so cool. You go there, you get your bag and your chip and meet everyone, get your swim cap, and the race directors all knew English very well. And so that helped me personally a lot. And then because I didn't know anyone else there, of course, until one of my other favorite parts is they selected one man and one woman to come from the U.S. And the man, my counterpart, was my great friend Andre, who races in a wheelchair. And when he finally arrived, it felt like, oh, a friend, and I've been waiting to see you. And that really warmed my heart. I felt like kind of like, okay, it's on. Andre is here. We have our backpack. We have a meeting in English, and we're about dinner, and it's on.
Wow. So with all of this, where was the actual hostel at, and what city were y'all in?
The city, what was the city called? I don't remember that actual city. It was a small town. The ironic part was that the swim start was on the other side of the lake. And I realized that later, kind of like, well, wait a minute. We're staying at the swim exit. How is this going to work?
Isn't that's like Jordan, though?
Ooh, good point. Very close to Jordan. I don't think we abutted it, but it wasn't quite over to Jordan. Terry, I'm very impressed with your geography. We realized it's just so funny how late in the game I learned these details. We learned that the next morning everyone drove over to the other side of the lake and started there and then swam back to the hostel.
So now then, to put that in perspective, that adds more logistical issues for you and Chris.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
There's only two of you, and now then you have to get a car over there, the canoe over there. He has to somehow get the car back over here so that way he can go out on the bike with you.
This came up many times.
Like,
fortunately, something I haven't mentioned yet is that I had the lifelong indebted pleasure of having my friend Molly come over to be the second crew member.
Molly?
My friend Molly was a crew member for my last Ultraman in Ultra 520K in Canada, and she happened to be over there and said, hey, just so you know, she was in Europe. She said, just so you know, if you want an extra crew member for Ultraman Israel, because actually technically on Ultraman rules and regulations, you need to have at least 2 crew members. Many people have several. I know someone who had 15 crew members once. And so it's just so ironic and so game-changing that she happened to be there because we could not have done it with just Chris.
Wow.
And this logistical issue of the morning is only one very small example of all 3 days realizing that we could never have it just Chris. And so it was a boon, to say the least, to have Molly there, who is also a terrific friend. So that worked.
So the day before the race, are you getting any type of certain meal in, or y'all doing anything like to celebrate? What was this like?
Yeah, it's much like an Ironman, so a classic pro load. I was just so excited to be there. I wanted to get in the water. And so I did one of my favorite things I've done at some Ironmans, which is practice getting in the water at the same time of day that you will for the race the next day, just to know that you can do it. And I just love that lake so much that I woke up so excited. Our hostel was so cool. There were green parrots outside. I went down my wetsuit, and there are pilgrims in the lobby laughing at me because I'm in a wetsuit, and I did a little swim, and then we had a huge breakfast. And we were just having so much fun. It didn't, just so different from an Ironman. We were just freaking out and stressing. You need to rack your bike and drop off bags. This was just like vacation.
Wow. So you don't check your bike the morning, or you don't check your bike the day before the race. You bring it the morning up. Everybody does.
Everybody does, and you just kind of bring it downstairs. It's not the racket specifically. There are only 30 of us, and so that made it very easy. To answer your logistical question, Chris and I got a running, and Molly stayed at the hostel with the car and my bike and set up transitionally.
Okay.
Very nice.
So I know just from your food perspective, you're going to need a lot of nutrition on just the first day alone, not counting the second or third.
Yeah.
But then also Chris and Molly are going to need food along the way too. In theory, they're going to need food. How did y'all combat this issue? Because you can't really just stop by the local gas station, can you?
You can't do anything. You might be in West Bank. You might be in passing a checkpoint or something. So we couldn't rely on anything. But a couple days before, I found a big grocery store and basically just loaded the car with any food and water I thought we could all need for 3 days. Mostly crap, mostly carbohydrates. And, in theory, there was kind of this is Amy VT's bag to eat anyway. But I knew that Chris and Molly would be dipping into my cookies and potato chips. So they were allowed to do that too.
Yeah.
You really had to plan logistically to pack the car for them as well. All food and water. Because there's no stopping either. They can't, as you said, they can't just pull off to a gas station. They're following you the whole way. So just for them to go to the bathroom is one, but they had to live in the car.
Yeah, day one alone, you were on the bike for 6.5 hours. And
short day.
And Chris was in the canoe for roughly 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
Just sitting there, going beside you.
Yeah.
Freaking craziness. So the day of the race, how much sleep do you feel like you got?
This is the thing with Ultraman. Unlike Iron Man, the night before, we all don't know how much sleep we get. We know it's gonna be a crapshoot. But at Ultraman, you're sleeping you need to sleep for the second day and third day. So every night for 4 nights, I had to make sure I got as much sleep as possible.
So you slept in?
Because the night before the first day, I'm sleeping for the second day as well. And so it's very tough because there's so much to do. We just saw Molly for the first time and new friends. It's also exciting. So I had to be very regimented and disciplined to go to bed as early as possible all 3 nights.
So I feel like this is a good time to actually mention the difference versus fake support from people and real support from people, especially spouses in general, because through all of these episodes that I've recorded so far, I've noticed a trend of people that say they support you versus people that really and truly support you. They say, I'm going to go do X, Y, and Z while you take a nap. I'm going to go down and get breakfast. I'll get you X, Y, and Z. Do you need anything else? Versus saying, hey, I'm going in there. Want me to get you anything? No, it's a different talk. It's a different type of support. It's a different type of love and dedication that is there versus I'm going to give you a rash of shit just for doing X, Y, and Z, but I'm here to support you.
Yeah.
What was this like with you, Chris, and Molly?
so hard for me because not only am I asking them to be that true, genuine support that you mentioned, that the latter, but they're entirely sacrificing 4 full days of their lives, arguably, totally off the calendar for training, working, anything that is for themselves is completely lost all of those days. That's very tough for me. I love them both so much. And, it's a non-negotiable, they have to be in a car. They're doing everything for me all of those days. Very unusual for me. I don't even like to ask for help carrying a grocery bag. I'm not someone who asks for help ever, really. And so this is one of the stretches and hardest parts about Ultraman for me is to do that. And to know that I still don't know how to substantially or adequately thank them for their true support. That's part of this race. That's part of it. That's part of the challenge.
Wow. So not only are you growing because you're doing the distance in the race, but emotionally you're growing as well.
Totally. It's a big introspective journey that is only partially athletic.
Wow. So you get to race morning. What was it like before you actually went to and got ready for the swim?
Well, what's cool again, instead of just doing an Ironman somewhere, every phase over the 3 days was an adventure because we're also in Israel and we're also with these new people and friends. And everything is so different that it made it a lot of fun too, which is a wonderful distraction from facing down the distance I was about to go. So we go in this van over to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, and Chris kind of says, "Is there a kayak here for me?" And we finally find his kayak, and I'm meeting a lot of people for the first time. Again, my friend Andre is there. Bless you. And that's always fun. I was so excited. Before an Ironman, you're thinking, can I make Ironman? Is I'm going to be too cold? Will I be the last pro out of the water? Like I always am. And I was just all smiles. I know it's not fun to swim 10K. It gets a little tedious at the end, but everything was so different and that it was a great distraction.
So just to kind of touch on this before we really get to it. So you're going to swim 10K and then you're going to bike roughly 90 miles. The bike course itself, from what I saw online, it starts in Israel, goes into Jordan, and then back out of Jordan, back into Israel.
There's a lot of interesting border dynamics over there. We did go through checkpoints. We never had to stop. I could always ride right through them on my bike. Very disconcerting because you drive by and there are tons of military women and men packing huge rifles right next to you and, not letting some people through. Meanwhile, I get a free ticket and can ride my bicycle. So it's just like the courses were very tough in terms of profile and conditions, but they were wild because there were signs of conflict and borders and history, and wartime history the whole time.
So I know you have electronic shifting on your bike. Before we get to the bike, we have to address the thing of what if your battery dies? Do you have 2 batteries? Are you charging it with a 110? Because you can't charge just regular plugs over there, right?
Oh, we brought adapters.
Okay.
Yeah. But there's no reason to not delve into this right now because it's germane. My battery of my Di2 did not die. However, my Di2 died. My rear derailleur stopped working.
3 miles in the bike ride.
Miles into the second day. And, I know we're jumping next day, but that happened, and the first thing I thought was what you thought was, oh, either my battery's dead, or actually I was thinking just a connection was loose and no problem. But I think I dunked it up that thing, and it was just random, totally useless. And so DI2 is always, I love it. But the risk is big too, as everyone knows. So that was interesting.
Wow. So whenever you get over to the swim start the morning of, what time did you wake up, and what was your morning ritual like before you actually headed over there to the swim start?
Another thing to your point before is not having everything readily available. You can't in Ultraman anyway, but especially in Israel, you can't rely on your classic breakfast food or even having coffee because it might not be there. I had to adapt a lot and get creative, and so I woke up. I would say 2 hours before the swim, and had to force a big breakfast because for that day, of course. But also at this point, I'm still eating for day 2 and 3. So I had to force a big breakfast that morning because that's what I needed for the next day as well. And so all 3 days are basically like forcing as much sleep and food as possible around the actual racing. And so woke up early, shoveled that down, went over to the swim start. I was not worried like I would be in Ironman about getting over there super early and doing a big warm up because you need much less warm up for an Ultraman. Wasn't going to be running that day. And since you're not going so super fast, I had a 10K swim. I had a 3-hour swim to warm up during, so I didn't do much warming.
So you're over there, everybody's wearing a wetsuit, there's canoes out there, you're about to swim across the actual Sea of Galilee here. The gun's about to go off. What's your mindset like?
I'm trying to make sure I'm not missing anything because, it's like how a lot of international races must feel coming here. If I went to race in China, all of the announcements and warnings are in Hebrew,
Really?
So I'm trying to I'm not missing anything and make sure they're not going to start early. And indeed, I was kind of still putting my wetsuit on when everyone seemed to be corralling down there. So this was all kind of part of the laughable part. And again, I look over and Chris has this weird look and he kind of looks at me like, don't worry, which with just a few minutes before the start, he still hadn't procured his kayak and paddle. So he was kind of like, everything's fine. I'll be right with you. And this is all a wild adventure. I'd be freaking out if it's an Ironman race, but it was fine. And so there were timing chips. And so when I saw everyone trip the wire to start, I thought I better too. And then the gun went off and very few people ran into the water. I think I ran into the water and my friend Andre used his arms to run in his style into the water. And then everyone else seemed to be kind of taking their time, which was unusual for me. It was fun. And then we were off coming across.
Man. So this isn't like the traditional sighting on a buoy line. This is a little bit different. Me through that.
It's crazy. In Canada, there are no buoys. And so I relied 100% on Chris and the kayak to navigate, which can be really hard if there's fog. As a backup, we put my phone in a plastic bag in case he needed to use the app, which is the compass app. I mean, this is like orienteering race too. But at Ultraman Israel, we had the tremendous luxury of intermittent buoys. I don't know how they did it, but someone got a permit to put up buoys, several across the Sea of Galilee, and it made for a straight shot. We were so lucky. Yeah. So
we didn't really mention phone coverage, but you had to worry about some kind of service there. Did you just carry your regular phone over there?
Well, I personally, as the participant, as the racer, I go 3 days without using my phone, just to not get sucked into social media, or anything. And so I relinquished my phone. But indeed, Chris and Molly did have some spotty coverage, here and there. Gosh, all the more reason why you got to download maps and courses and memorize them and be autonomous entirely, which is yet another component of Ultraman in general, beyond the athleticism, is being self-sufficient.
Wow. Now, knowing that you're going to be in the swim for 3.5 hours, somewhere in there, you're going to swim, you're going to end up swimming at 153-100, phenomenal, for the whole 10K, which I think I could, not a lot of people can. I would take train, but I'm not there right now. But were you eating on the way?
Yeah. I was actually hoping to go faster. I've been swimming better than I had in prior Ultramans. But it might have been a little longer day, and I wasn't really pushing it too hard. Didn't look like there was a lot of competition around me. You don't need to blow yourself up during a swim, that's for sure. Chris knew my eating regimen, which involved gels. And he would just call me over to the kayak when it was time, every 45 minutes, and say, "Oh, it's time for, a squirt of power like Gatorade or something, and then a power gel. And you have to do a little backstroke during that time to take them in. And then you throw it back in the kayak and get to swimming.
Wow. So was the water clear?
It was crazy. It was so clear that I could drink it. It was a little cloudy to see through, but it was wonderfully warm and very clear. And I couldn't ask for better.
How far down could you see? Could you see the bottom?
Couldn't see the bottom till the end. It had this kind of milky. It was from clay. The texture or appearance. So it was kind of pearly. But it was so cool, and it wasn't dirty at all. It's awesome.
So about the swim, do you have anything else you want to add about the swim?
No, again, the time didn't really matter to me. You do have to stop and eat and hope you go in a straight line. I will say hats off to the man who came out of the water first, who had one leg, and certainly hats off to my friend Andre, who's a phenomenal swimmer, and he got out, I think, just behind me. So it's just so inspirational to see those guys.
So whenever you actually get out of the water, this isn't like a typical transition where you're running in, trying to get to your bike real quick. This is a little bit more, take your time, do it safely, get your bike, and have fun on your bike ride.
It's certainly not like where, man, I try to just spend a few seconds in transition. It's just basically helmet and jump on. So it's a little bit more relaxed than that. But Terry, I don't like to hang out. And so my friend Molly was there to her, and we went bike, and she stripped my wetsuit, and I got right on. But the race director was kind of like, Amy, don't you want to take a shower? They had showers there. Don't you want to stop at our aid station? I was kind of like, no, I need to get out on the bike. But I guess a lot of people rinsed off afterwards and took some more time in transition. Some people, I heard, at least one person went to his room at the hostel to change. I could never go to my room during a race because I would go to bed. that was so I do believe I had the fastest transition time, maybe by a couple minutes.
Wow.
That's my style.
So with this bike course coming up, you know you're going to be on the bike ride for more than 5.5 hours easy. Yep. That's a given because of how long this first day is. Are you using a certain type of chamois cream to make sure you're not rubbing raw, or are you relying on your fit and chamois to make sure you're not getting too much of a saddle sore? What is this like?
Usually this sounds like a really terse answer, but it's been true for me for all Ultramans, is I've done so much volume already. And when I train, I try to replicate race conditions, as I mentioned. And so I had been training in that same saddle with the thin chamois for hundreds and hundreds of miles leading up to that. So, although there was lubrication in the morning, I was not worried about the proverbial undercarriage.
Okay. So as you get out on the bike course, you're one of the first ones out on the bike course I saw. What was the road quality like and your first impression of the bike course?
Exciting because, we're going up through the Golan Heights and looking down on Jordan, and I know everything is historic left and right. There were some harrowing sites. There was a temple that had been bombed And then meanwhile, you forget, oh, I need to also be paying attention because I'm responsible for my course knowledge. They marked it well, and Molly and Chris were in the car behind me, so there wasn't a single turn in question at all. The whole race, it was amazing. But everything was so wildly exciting that I didn't worry about every little elevation gain or road quality. Traffic lightened up on that day on the Golan Heights, and so that was a luxury. Yeah.
What about the road quality? What was this like?
The road quality, the whole time was pretty great. These were major. Yeah, because, these were pretty major thoroughfares in Israel, so they kind of had to be. At some points, these shoulders were dirty, especially on the second day, and so there was a lot of glass, and probably the biggest difference riding between Ultraman and any other triathlon is that these aren't closed courses. You're riding with traffic. In Canada, that means if there's a red light, you stop at the red light. In Israel, it means you better watch out. There are crazy drivers, and you're driving huge trucks and buses, and they are not used to cyclists. And so talk about autonomy, unlike, an Ironman where you can rely on a course being closed. You have to watch for cars and certain death at every.
Right, because if you get thrown off your bike and you have to go to a hospital, you're going to a hospital in Jordan, Israel-ish.
We tried not to think about that.
Yeah, because, I mean, that would be a nightmare.
It was, with a smaller race, this was an extremely well-supported race, but it's not like there were fleets of ambulances. Like an Ironman. The biggest danger for other people was at the end of the second day, you start to get dreary, you start to get weary, and it made people dizzy. Someone did crash. This is you riding over 200 miles on an open highway. Isn't just yet another dynamic to face in this crazy race.
So I know you're still using your Live bike here. How was this holding up for the bike ride on day one?
Day one, perfect. I just love my bike. I have the best bike fit known to man and womankind, thanks to Output Fit Studio here in Portland. I was just having so much fun. There wasn't any loneliness because the whole time Chris and Molly were in a car behind me, and just intermittently, maybe every 45 minutes at least, they would come up and give me a hand up for food and drink. And then meanwhile, all around me was this stunning scenery. And as I said, some harrowing scenery as you look down over onto Jordan, and there's barbed wire fences and potential landmines,
Yeah, you said there were landmine signs.
Yes, there were. We hadn't heard of anything, but just all of these indications that, of war, of real and present conflict, as seen in, during the ride, probably somewhere in every hour or two, I would see a major automatic weapon somewhere on someone,
Did that make you feel safe or worried about that?
We've been there in Israel long enough to know that that's just what people pack, but it's more of the wild adventure part. One of the photographers leaned over once, when they get low to take your picture during a race, and there's a gun in his back of his jeans, just sticking out. The race photographer has a gun. I don't think they do for most Ironmans. Finishers picks. Maybe some finishers picks guys are packing.
So as far as the day one goes, how did that go for you?
Day one was sensational. I was smiling pretty much most of the time. So much fun to have Molly and Chris there. The hand-up food was so much fun. When it wasn't Power Bar, it was like local wafer bars or cookies or Pringles. And we got something very interesting about Ultraman Israel, and this isn't true with I think any other Ultraman or ultra distance race like with these distances in the world, is that everything was point to point. And so swim point to point, the next bike. When we're biking, the cars, when I was cycling the first day, the car is loaded because we're staying somewhere different that night. So I'm cycling to our new place, and it's a place I've never been. So it's so exciting to think, here I am in a race, and I'm cycling to a new place, and I'm staying here tonight. So I cycled right up to our hostel. That was the finish line, day one, where we're going to stay. And it was a beautiful hostel. The next day, we'd be riding to yet our next place. And of course, the run, I ran to our next place. Pretty unique there.
Wow. So in good spirits, mentally, physically, any pain, issues, soreness?
Nothing. Tip
Wow.
top.
So
Tip top.
now then you change out of your day one kit, get a shower, get in bed, get some fuel, and then go to sleep.
Yeah, as soon as possible. But again, one of my favorite parts about Ultraman is we're in a hostel. Everyone eats together. So I got to catch up with people who had just finished and the race director. We're all eating together. It's wonderful.
So after you get in bed, you wake up the next day, you have the long bike, the longer day here. And with this day, you get up. How do you feel?
Not bad. I didn't push it too hard that first day, so I'm still pretty excited. Felt great.
Wow. So no fatigue?
Sure, fatigue, nothing unusual. And I had other Ultramans to compare it with, and it felt in keeping.
Okay. So with day 2, I know you're going to pass by the Dead Sea?
Yeah, for most of the time. I'd never seen the Dead Sea, but I mean, how cool is it to line up for something real hard, but think, I'm going to see a major world wonder at some point on this ride. I mean, it just makes the excitement factor, distract you from a lot of the tedium. So cool.
So whenever you get ready for day 2, this is when you have the bike issues later on in the day, but did you have a goal power number that you were wanting to go off of?
Yeah, and my coach is so great, and don't forget I have the luxury of him being right there on the eye, seeing if there are any adjustments. He looked at what I did on day 1 to kind of calibrate or, reassess our plan. And he said, yep, no, same thing, just, tiny bit lower watts. And then he said, and you were a little low in your cadence, probably a lot low first day. So let's spin it up a little bit more today. And so that was my goal for day 2. Wow. Little lower power, much higher cadence. Yeah.
So as you start day 2, how does the first 50, 60 miles go before the mechanic?
Great. It was fun. Unlike day 1, I had people around me to ride with. A lot of the strong men I hadn't seen the day before. And since we all started together, we all had to start kind of neutral, but make sure we get away because there's no drafting. But for maybe 50 miles, there were guys kind of all around me, up the road or back down the road. So that was fun. I like that.
Wow. And then at mile 63, that's whenever your derailer messes up and you can't shift. You're stuck in a few gears.
Yep.
So what happened with that?
Dun, dun, dun. It just stopped shifting. I thought it would just be a little connection, so I pulled over, and Chris got out of the car and looked at it and thought, all right, this is not just a connection. Could check the battery and determined it wasn't the battery. And so I got back on the bike, kept going with just 2 gears. It was very hard. On uphills, it was nearly impossible. It was just shy of impossible. And I truly did not think that I could finish this ride with just these 2 gears, because of the uphills. Yeah.
So for anybody basically that doesn't know this race course, and I didn't know it until I pulled up some of the elevation for this course, but the last, 75 kilometers is pretty much uphill.
And I had been facing that down I mean, the second I knew that I was stuck in 2 gears, and I thought, and I'm not even, it only gets worse from here. And I'll be tireder then. And everything was compounding because I was using all of the might, especially my upper quads, to just barely make it over the top of my pedal stroke so I didn't fall down the hill into Jordan. So meanwhile, I was thrashing my quads. And my plan was to keep a higher cadence to save my quads because, next day, 52-mile run through the desert. And so I just kept thinking, even if it was possible, I'm getting thrashed. And there's just more and more. On relatively slight downhills where I could get power, and if I had my full range of gears, I had to coast. So I was losing a ton of time on descents as well. So it was all just, snowball affecting. And it was really hard. It was, yeah.
I feel like emotionally that would take a toll on you.
I mean, I was crying. It was only, probably mile 70 something where I already started to cry. It's not good to be crying at mile 70 with 100 miles to go. 100 miles is a long ride usually. And I was just starting. I mean, this is where you lend not only kind of physically and in terms of staying safe and getting nutrition, you rely on your crew. And then for mechanics and stuff like this, but this is where your crew really comes to rescue, is I basically outsourced my emotions to Molly and Chris, who buoyed me and would just, they had to cheerlead for me, basically, for the remaining 100 miles.
So I'm sure at first, if you're like what I would do is I would try to hide that from them and not let them know that I'm not up here crying. Because they're behind me. They can't see me. Nothing is happening up here. Just leave me alone. Yeah. But how long did that last?
I did do that. You're so right, Terry. You know me so well. I did a lot of it's okay. At least I have 2 gears, I'm sure it'll be fine. And we thought we knew we were going to check it halfway. There's a big halfway aid station. And we thought, well, we'll really look at it then. So there was a glimmer of hope. But, when I hit a first steep hill, it was so hard and nearly impossible that I was crying, and I had to show them because I needed help emotionally. I was kind of like, guys, what do? I don't think I can do this. And so it wasn't a matter of seeming tough. Genuinely needed their help to tell me if I could do this or not.
You had to show them your vulnerable side.
I had to. They, and they have to know where I am so they know what to do for me too.
I know Chris has seen this side of you, obviously, but Molly probably hasn't, and opening up that side to somebody is hard enough, but whenever you're having to bike another 80 miles, it's even harder.
Oh my gosh. When we talk about selecting members, I've helped their first Ultraman with some logistics stuff, and I've talked a lot about selecting your crew members. It's no joke. First off, crew need to get along swimmingly, but secondly, they're going to see everything that's not pretty about you. It's like therapy, Molly had done it for me in Canada, and so the precedent was set, and she's also a close friend whom I adore, and so I wasn't worried about exposing that to her. Nothing she hadn't seen.
Man, so as you get past this hurdle, does it get any easier? Because I know it's just literally, it's uphill from here.
Yeah, well, I had a glimmer. We tried to fix it at the halfway point. Chris even took my saddle off, checking connections. And so I kind of thought, it'll be fixed by then. But then me, I don't even like to unclip. And I had to sit there at the halfway point just waiting. Poor Chris, everyone was, convening around him. It was very hard. I just stood there, lost a ton. I don't know. We spent 20 minutes there or something. Not very like me. As I said, I don't even unclip. But we tried to fix it at the halfway point, and poor Chris had to come back to me and say, nope, you have to either stop or you have to finish with 2 gears.
man, and like I'm trying to put myself in his shoes. Like that had to be so hard for him just to come back there and say, "I'm sorry, I can't do enough right now for you."
So
Because he knows what you have to do physically, but then emotionally, he can't do what he needs.
he's playing the role of husband, coach, crew member, and bike mechanic all at once. And he had to tell me all of those things were down the tubes, pretty much, very, I'll never forget the look on his face. And I mean, having a spouse be a crew member is it makes the most sense because there's hard shit that goes down out there. And I just, this is also the badinage, the back and forth that Chris and Molly do in the roles they play in my life is that Chris took it on really heavily and emotionally there. And then Molly's good to come in and kind of lighten the mood. And I'm pretty sure she said something like, well, there's no room for you in the car anyway, so you have to keep riding.
Right in the bus.
And poor Chris. Chris was also grappling. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, we disconnected. Chris was also grappling about me because of traffic, because traffic was a little dangerous out there, and so I know he was nail biting a lot of the time, and I just remember knowing that there wasn't really much choice there. I actually technically didn't fit in the car. And I thought, well, we'll see what happens. I'm going to get back on the bike and there's keep moving forward. Just keep swimming, just keep trying. If there's a hill, if they keep getting worse and I have to walk or stop, I'll deal with that then. And this is where Ultraman starts to get these crazy metaphors that relate to the rest of your life, looking down decisions, thinking, persevere, deal with that later, just keep going forward, just keep swimming. And that took a lot. It was very difficult. It was a long day. But I just kept moving.
So how much time do you have right now?
Oh, I'm fine.
You're fine?
Yeah.
You don't have to go to a meeting?
No, well, I was confused about the time change. And so, the difference in time between, I meant 4:45 my time.
Okay, so we have another 2 hours.
Yeah.
Okay. And I was thinking you had a minute and a half right now. And I was
Sorry.
we're going to have to mix it up a little bit. So after all of this, so I'm trying to look at the map here and kind of see about where that is. You still had the Dead Sea over here to your left at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you had the Dead Sea on your left. You're going up this mountain, basically. You have roughly 400 feet of gain. I'm sure on that number. But it was quite a bit. It was substantial.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So
I'm not sure about the number. It felt like the worst of Lake Placid to me.
Lake Placid is easy though, right? So total climbing on day 2 is 8,000 feet. Just saw that. So 8,000 feet, and a lot of that is right about the 125-mile mark forward.
Yeah.
Which is where you have most of it.
Yeah.
How was your mindset through this, knowing that you only had 2 gears? You had to literally do what isn't cool for a long.
Well, and we had a specific for dealing with the course that starts kind of down flat and ends up uphill. I had a plan, very specific numbers, cadence as well. It was all out the window. The plan was to spin up these hills because I had a 52-mile run the next day. And so all the plan, forget the clock time. I believe I would have, a whole hour faster if it wasn't for this. I had no idea the whole time if I could actually finish. And so every mile was just getting through the next mile. I had no idea if it was going to keep getting so much steeper that I technically could not pedal my bike. And it was dangerous too. On the oncoming track were screaming trucks and buses. And so Safety was the concern here too. Yeah.
I've been to Afghanistan twice, and I've seen how loaded they pack normal trucks with stuff. And I have a feeling it's like the jingle trucks loaded down, and you're looking at that and like, there's no way anything is strapped in. I don't see a strap anywhere. Like, that's what I'm picturing. Is that about right?
Oh yeah. And you see it all. Meanwhile, the trucks are passing each other on 2-lane highways coming right at you, and they're toppling and screeching, and it was wild. And that on top of me only having 2 gears, I couldn't be reactive on uphills because I had the paperboy actually. So I'd go over, like I'd have to switch back. So I'd go over towards the oncoming toppling trucks that you saw in Afghanistan, and then switch back. And I'm barely making over the top while I was screaming, and it was crazy.
And you're using your tri-bike.
Yeah.
So you didn't have the luxury of having, like, horns or what they call drops on the...
Oh, yeah, horns. I know that my hands were like claws, too, because you have to death grip if you're paperboying up a hill. You can't let go for the life of you. I remember there were bugs on me, and you couldn't swat them because I'm death gripping, and it was just, it was tough. I actually had to plan out eating and drinking because I had to death grip my bars uphill, and I couldn't, like, think.
So the nutrition plan was to stop then?
No, and drink. I just planned around it, a slight uphill or a flat, as I would make sure I could eat.
Okay, so among all the races that you could actually compare this to, what would you compare this to?
Nothing.
So this isn't like going backwards on Lake Placid on the Keene descent. This is worse than that.
Because it's so apples and oranges, because the adversity was like coming from 4 different directions. The course was hard and a bit perilous. I had a mechanical that made my plans go out the window. The distance makes it different from an Ironman.
Because this is happening after the 112-mile mark that most people are like, all right, cool, I'm done. I don't have to go past that. But you're like going 150, and now then you have a mechanical, and you still have 50, 60 miles to go.
Yeah, it was 170 something that second day.
Oh, okay, so even more to go.
Even more. And I don't know what, this is where crew comes in. This is where your crew takes over some of your emotions and motivation for you. And Molly would be poring over the map and what hills were coming next and how steep they were. She would just like stare at it and the GPS, and she would say things to me like, VT, there is a hill around the corner. It's not as steep as the last one you did, and it's shorter. Or VT, in 2 miles, you will have a hill. It's steep, but it's way shorter. I know you can do it. And like that's it. They got me all the way to the end.
So there's no aid stations here, so there's no porta potties.
Yeah.
And bathrooms are natural for everybody. How did they actually use the bathroom here? Because I know Chris he's a guy just like me. I can just stop on the side of the road. I'm good. But for Molly, it's a little bit different. And then you interpret this is actually in another country. That might not be the best thing to do.
Major concern.
Right.
Yeah.
How do you deal with these dynamics?
First off, I'm going to throw her under the bus and tell the world that Molly learned to pee outside for the first time in Ultraman Canada, or Ultra 520K. So that was, I introduced her to that experience. This one, certainly at the halfway point, there was an aid station, like a big race, organized kind of stop. That was one place where she could. They snuck off to either a gas station or rest area a couple of times on the road. And they would maybe pull up to me and say, hey, are you good? We need 5 minutes. We'll be right back on your tail in 5 minutes. So that happened.
Now, I know I interviewed a few people from Ultraman Florida this year, and they actually said that the crew members from other crews would help along the way for other people. Is that the same camaraderie here? Oh,
totally. Oh, yeah. It's one of the best parts. And crew members get to know each other very well. They're like a whole new family. We don't get to know each other as well. We can't even craft. But what was so interesting is most of the other crews didn't speak English. And so there was some interesting and adventurous communication issues there. But we could all like give each other whatever, but we started to really thin out by the end of the second day, and then on the run we thinned out so much I actually didn't really see any other. Yeah.
So if you think of miles 125 on the second day through miles 165,
Okay.
mentally this was hard. What got you through this? Because it's literally you on the bike, nobody else. You're the one having to do the work. How do you get past this mentally? Because this had to be a really bad spot for you.
Toughest ride I've ever done in my life, no question. I was at the end of my rope. I mean, physically, that's one thing. But mentally, I had no clue if I could finish this. Like, just in terms of possibility, in terms of physical, can I make this bike go up this hill? And the only way I got through it, two things. One, Molly and Chris, my crew. I stopped assessing and giving, and diatribing some script in my own head, and I started to just listen to them for what will be, and they would tell me what was around every corner. They reminded me how much distance was left. And then the other thing, which has to do with my crew, because they are crucial in reminding you of this, is I overachieved. I think Coach gave me an A++ on hydrating and staying fueled, because I know I've done this. When the going gets tough, ironically, I think people start to restrict or give up, or they just don't feel like staying hydrated and fueled. And you think, well, I might be pulling off in a couple miles anyway. Why would I load up on sugar water? I also didn't want it. I was so dejected that I stopped being hungry and thirsty. I overforced down the fuel and the food. And basically every time they pulled up to me, I would take something else. I even got off schedule and overfueled and drank. And in preparation for finishing that day and sticking with it for the next day, the run, just to insulate myself there. So those were the two ways I got through it.
Wow. So you have flats here.
Oh, yeah.
To add on top of everything.
Oh, yeah. That was not cute. When I got a flat, I was like, I have a flat tire or whatever. It was flat. And Chris, this is what's cool is you get a fast wheel change. So Chris had his bike there. We had another set of wheels, and he gave me a wheel change. So that was the least of my problems that day.
Oh, so you literally just, all right, take one wheel off, put the other one on, call it a day.
Yeah. Yep. Piece of cake. That was nothing.
And y'all have a local wheel company out of Washington?
Right here in Oregon.
Oregon. Okay, Oregon.
Yeah,
Why do I think Washington?
Because they're neighbors right next door. I can see Washington from here pretty much. Rolf Fema is out of Eugene, Oregon. Coolest wheels ever. Their sourcing is phenomenal, and they're as racy and high quality as any other top line race wheel out there. I would never ride anything else. So we traded out one back racy wheel for Chris had his training wheels with him, and then we traded it back to my racy wheel. Somehow they changed the tube
in the car.
Jeez. Yeah.
Man, so on the second day, was the road quality still good?
No, it got a little worse because this was a major highway, and it would do there were turtles like reflectors, and then some washboard. And so you had to decide if you were going to be on the outskirts with sand and glass or on the inside, and it was hard to traverse that for a lot of the mileage. But it was a spectacular highway along the Dead Sea. The terrain on either side was like Mars. It started to get very deserty, and it was spectacular. And the sunset was like the Patagonia label. It was like purple, pink over the desert with rock formations. It was stunning.
Wow. So it doesn't sound like there's much shade.
No shade whatsoever. If it was hotter, that would have been an issue, but it wasn't that hot.
Right. it also rained on the second day.
Second day in the morning, which is probably the culprit for my shifting going out because it got really cruddy in there from the water and debris from the road. My bike was very dirty. Yeah, that's probably why.
Okay. So, did you worry about sunscreen?
No, I run pretty dark. I go native pretty. We had just spent a week in a surf town, and so I'm sure I did put sunscreen on. It's safer to do so, but I don't.
Okay. Now you're using a different kit the second day than the first day, and you're using a different outfit on the third day than the previous 2 days. But you got some nasty sweat in there and all that, so you have to travel with training gear, all these kits. How much stuff did you actually bring with you?
Yeah, that's a great question because, like another Ultraman, that's a major issue, but you're staying in the same place and it's probably bigger, so you can kind of hang your stuff up over there. I had like biohazard after every day. My kit and socks or whatever were like, should be thrown away or burned or something. And then we had to travel and shove stuff in the car, and I had to go to bed. And so it was pretty crazy. Basically, I just took a bunch of plastic bags and I just shoved all my stuff in the night after. And I just thought and tied up the bag and thought, we'll deal with this later. If it's still, it's not molded by now. I had to wash out my shoes because I needed those for the second day on the bike, but that was pretty much it. But oh yeah, brand new kit every day for sure. I planned that one out a while. I even had extras. Okay.
What about the water quality? Did you worry about the water quality from making sure that it was safe to drink, having cold water, ice water? I mean, this is concerns that you don't really think about, but they're real.
I thought about it and just in case, bought a bunch of bottles for the car, like a case of big bottles. But the water quality was fine.
Okay. So did you have cold water or was this just water?
Yeah. Like, you were talking about them changing a flat in the car, which I think I just realized. Molly, sitting shotgun, always was doing some concoction in the front seat while moving, filling my next bottle with cold sports drink and allowing me to toss in a kicked bottle from the road. And I'm sure she has bruises from them. They were a miracle cold sugar water aid station rolling.
So how many bottles did you bring?
Oh, actual plastic bottles. I think I brought 4 Power Body Inc. Plastic bottles, and then Molly would just rotate
them?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So what about the bike course? Haven't we covered that you got to experience?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, everything was spectacular left to right. And we were coming from the top, which was more than there were trees, down to the true desert. And this was the stuff I imagined. Like, look left, look right, there's just sand. It's crazy. Or the Dead Sea. There's a checkpoint, It was pretty wild. But I think the wildest part of this whole day, too, was that we pretty much rode from the north to the south of an entire country. That was by design, and it was really cool, just conceptually, to think about traversing an entire country in one day.
Wow. So you're staying in different hostels along the way. Logistically, did y'all have to make sure you register and get a room at the hostel? Did you have to, because you usually have to pay for where you stay. You don't stay there for free. So what was this like day to day, logistically?
The race director well in advance worked with me on all of that well in advance. And we were completely taken care of. It was wonderful because that's the last thing you want to think about, obviously. I show up at the desk of a hostel, in my kit, sweaty and cold and thinking, hi, I need to shower as soon as possible. But it was all taken care of. And every racer and crew member stayed in the same place. And so it was just so cool. It was like we were on a field trip.
So did y'all have to pay one fee up front for all the registrations? Or was all that taken care of because they gave you the entry?
Andre and I were extremely fortunate to be covered for lodging during the race.
Wow.
And extremely fortunate. to the point where Chris and I could not have economically done this without the great gift of the Ministry of Tourism at Israel. Yes.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
So whenever you actually get to miles, say 165, 166, 68, 69, and 70, you're almost done with the bike ride on day 2.
Yeah.
After the immense emotional roller coaster that you've been on that day, what was this like knowing that you're almost done with this?
I was waiting to the point when I knew Molly would tell me the hardest climbing was over. Then you know you can do anything. And I believe there was still 2 hours to go when I had gone through the hardest climb. And I don't remember how much mileage that was. But I remember thinking how funny Ultraman puts things in perspective to be riding and think, oh, I'm pretty much done. There are only 2 hours left. Like, I just rolling home, just 2 hours. Like, that's nothing. And it was relatively nothing. It was not even a fifth of the whole day. And so that was the moment I was waiting for. Molly telling me the hardest climbing is over. There's still more, but she said, you will not climb anything steeper than you have already from this point out. And I think there was about 2 hours to go. And then I thought, I'm in. I will finish today.
And that's at the point where 8 hours in, because this is a 10-hour day.
Yeah.
On top of the previous 9-hour day.
Yeah.
So that's roughly 17 hours into a workout over 2 days. Then she says, hey, you're good. You don't have to worry about anything steeper. And you're like, thank God, I'm good.
Thank God. It's all downhill from here. And downhill was hard because I didn't have purchase, because I didn't have a small gear either. And so it's not like I could cruise on home because I only had one gear. So even when it was flat, I couldn't really
take advantage of it.
Take advantage of it, exactly. So when it got hard again was that when the sun started to set, and I thought, I had no plans on being out here past dark. I didn't even have a headlamp. I was ambitious. But I'm not going to be out here after dark. But sunsets at 4:30 there. And so I just thought, all right, it's going to be easy from here on out, but I just want to get back and get into our hostel. And so it was a long couple hours, but oh man, when Molly said you have a mile left on it, and
what was that like?
Oh, I looked up the road and I just wanted to see something. Like, show me. I need to believe it. I need to see it.
Because are you using a bike computer?
Yeah. But it started to get off at that, at 170 miles in, your Garmin and GPS don't entirely align with the course, and you don't know exactly. So she did, yeah.
So whenever you actually pulled into the parking lot and you stop the bike, this is not like Ironman events where they're like, here's the dismount line, here's transition. No, this is, hey, you're to the parking lot that's probably empty, and you get off your bike and you take your shoes off and you go inside and probably get ready for a shower.
It's so, the starts and finishes at this race are so funny because there might not be anyone there. At this finish, it was a little far from where we were staying, so I knew I'd be stuck there for a little bit, which I had plans for. Because I didn't fit in the crew car, and so I had to get another ride, or someone did. But I saw the arches. I had to go through timing mat. There was one man there, an official. It's like, hey, Amy. And then my plan was, don't celebrate too much. Get right into dry shorts or pants and chug some chocolate milk and keep eating and drinking. Because I give this advice to other Ultraman competitors, is it's tempting to finish on a day and stop and talk, hang around in your chamois, maybe get a massage. At other ones, they have it. For me, I knew I had a plan with 1 day still to go. I finished, got off the bike, got right into dry clothes, chugged some chocolate milk, and kept eating. So that was my strategy that day.
So you got out of the shorts, which is obviously soaked more than likely from bodily functions.
Yeah.
And you get some food, you get some chocolate milk. This is a dairy product in another country.
Yeah.
Did you anticipate that might have some negative consequences on your body?
I didn't, because we had been there almost 2 weeks at that point. We kind of knew what was up and where things came from and brands and stuff like that. And I had done chocolate milk, another Ultraman, so I was fine with that. I think it'd be more dangerous for me to be discerning and not eat and drink, and so that was the key there.
Okay,
yeah.
So I don't know how to mention this, but I feel like you kind of left something out there. I want to make sure we touch it if it is there, but there had to be a point where you and Chris hug after this bike ride because he knows what you just went through physically and emotionally, and you came out the other side of it. What was this like?
Oh, Molly and Chris and I had I have chills right now. Cause this wasn't like I finished day 2 and did all right and did a good job. This was like, oh my God, your derailleur broke at 63. And I got Terry were such amazing cheerleaders. I could not have said that without them. But at the end, I mean, we were all just kind of like, we can't believe that happened. And then I guess I learned that they both didn't think I could do it. I guess they would roll down the window and say, "You got it. We think you can do it." And then they roll up the window and be like, "Oh no, it's just." And so my sigh of relief for getting through it was theirs was as big because they really didn't know if I were. And so I just like talk about putting anything in perspective. Great, I have a 52-mile run the next day. That was the most epic ride I have ever done in my life ever. And so our little finish line party was quite the celebration.
Wow. I mean, I can only imagine tears were probably shed. Like, oh my gosh, a big size relief. Like, get that bike away from me right now.
Yeah, I gave that bike to Chris, and he's got some residual guilt, because I think he feels like mechanically responsible. But I do remember looking at that dirty bike thinking, I don't need to ride you for a long time, not in Israel during this trip. So I was happy to give that bike away.
And it's been a few weeks since that bike ride, and I'm sure you've gotten back on it since then.
It's clean too.
Okay, it's clean now.
And it works now.
Well, good.
Yeah.
So you change. What do you get for food-wise as soon as you get done with day 2?
As you know, we've been living out of the car, so it's whatever's in the car.
Really?
Yeah. And whatever sounds good, and pack everything and see what sounds good. At that point, I only had eyes for Pringles. Just loved the Pringles. I'm sure the salt, And so I probably slammed a half a tin of Pringles and chocolate milk. I was like, because, dinner is coming, but you can't wait to clean up and go to dinner. You got to keep it going if there's another big day of racing left.
Right. So most people burn on average around 500 to 700 calories per hour on the bike.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere in that range. And you're on the bike for roughly 10 hours and some change on day 2. Not counting the deficit you established on day of 9 hours. You're in a huge calorie deficit here already.
Yeah.
And you're obviously not going to be able to eat that much. You obviously want to do a really good time to run the next day of a double marathon. How are you approaching this from a nutrition aspect?
Yeah. Well, we had, and I don't know the numbers, but I know what I was supposed to eat and drink. It got a little adjusted when I couldn't eat going uphill. And so I erred on, to correct for it, I erred on the side of eating and drinking more pretty much the whole second half of the bike. And so I pounded it in, hundreds of calories. And the reason I could do that, to prepare for the next day, not only to finish the bike, but to get ready for that double marathon. The reason you can do that in Ultraman is you can overeat and drink or err on that side is, you don't have to be as calculated because you're not running right after that day. Because in an Ironman, there's
the sloshing and
Yeah, you don't want to risk overeating. You might not absorb it, or it could upset your stomach. But on this ride, I just like every second I was stuck coasting a lot because I didn't have a faster gear, and so I would just coast and keep drinking because why not? And it seemed to work.
Wow. So whenever you go to sleep that night, what are you actually feeling like? Do you have a lot of soreness, fatigue, pain anywhere? Because you literally have to think you thrashed your legs through a whole day.
Yeah, it was, I'm just plugging in. My legs hurt. That was painful. It was like the top of my quads, were kind of screaming. And so if I was at home, I'd probably get in the Normatec recovery pumps. But obviously didn't travel with those. So I just gave a light massage. I had to take Advil. There's I had some compression tights, but, there's really one, like the principal thing to do in that scenario for Ultraman is just go to bed as early as you can. Like, just go to bed. Like,
man,
I think a lot of people might spend a lot of time with ritual or massage or something. I just thought, chow down your food and shower, go to bed, go lie down.
So you got a shower after day 2 on the bike. Did you realize you had a chafing anywhere?
Oh, you must be a triathlete. It had set in at that point, Terry. It had set in for sure. The chafing had set in. Nothing I wasn't expecting. Classic chafing. I mean, that's just 170 miles with some biohazard. Inevitable.
It's gonna happen.
Gonna happen.
So, as far as day 1 and day 2 goes, do you have anything that we didn't touch on that you want to mention?
Probably, but I could write novels about how this event was. So, so no.
Logistically, did we leave anything out?
I don't think so. No, I mean, after every leg, I'm compelled to remind people that also out there on the course with me was my friend Andre, and he,
his race is completely challenging in a different way,
to say the least. Yeah. And you know what? Yeah, think about that a whole lot out there. Like, so my derailleur broke. Andre has to use his arms this whole time. It's a massive shot of perspective for sure.
How did he end up finishing day 2?
He had a mechanical. Oh, on day 2. On day 2, he also had mechanical, but he could finish okay. It was later, a little after me, but I waited for finish, and he came rolling in.
Wow, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So you go to bed on day 2, you wake up on day 3, getting ready to get out of bed. If you're like most of us, first thing you do in the morning is go pee. How did your legs feel?
Well, the alarm went off, and I thought, no, I really thought it was like, right now, is it really time to get up? You know, that awful feeling. I did get up, and my legs felt bad. But it's like, it was such a miracle I finished the second day that I didn't even really care. It was kind of like, well, we'll see what happens today. At least I don't have to ride my bike.
Jeez. So what kind of shoes did you use for this? Because this isn't like a road marathon or anything like that. This is a little bit different. This course this is like running through the Grand Canyon. That's about
what it's like. And it's funny you mentioned that because Chris and I have a pretty tight budget, and I did get a new pair of Ironman shoes and a new pair of half Ironman shoes this year. So I was like shoe rich. But we didn't know I was doing in Israel, and I had already surpassed our shoe budget for the year. And then when I realized I was doing in Israel, I was kind of like, Chris, I think I need some like sand runners or something. And so I got affiliate with a shoe company. So I actually, all of those different distances are different brands. And I got my favorite trail shoes, which are Nike Tigers, which
really?
is cool. Yeah, I love them, which is cool for me because I work at Nike too, and you have to wear Nikes. So I love them, and they were perfect.
Wow.
Awesome. Yeah, perfect.
So
like heavier than you'd want for like a road race for sure. Perfect for
So I interviewed a girl named Chris for Leadville 100 this year, and she actually put little things over her shoes to not get like the sand and stuff in there.
Yeah.
Do you use those?
No, like gaiters. No, I should have. I got scree in my shoes for sure. But I'm also, I don't know if this is smart. I'm not condoning it, but I try to go in all three sports as simple as possible. I basically look at myself head to toe and think, do you need that piece of gear? I don't like a lot of gear. And so I didn't use them. But also in Ultraman, if you had, a bunch of sand down your shoe, you could stop and dump it out too. So.
Right. So I know Comrades is 56 miles and this is 52 miles, and they say Comrades takes 110,000 steps, and this was probably going to be close to 100,000 steps that you're going to take in the day. So
didn't know that. Thank you. And this was 53 miles, so maybe
pretty close to that. So how are you going to prepare for this mentally and physically? Did they show you your placing overall, or did you know that you were where you were in the placing where you were?
I did. It was interesting to not have female competitors with whom I was neck to neck or anything. That's been tough before to think I have to race this 52 miles. I knew that there was a man ahead of me. Their egos are real and present in Israel as they are in other parts of the world as well. So I don't know how a couple of the guys felt about me. At the start line, a big group was talking in Hebrew and kind of laughing and looking at me. And I said, I know you guys are talking about me right now. And one of them said, we're just placing bets on if you'll beat all the men, or two of our guys here can beat you today. And so they gave me a little bit of a hard time, but yeah.
So what was for breakfast on day 3?
I think I had cornflakes for breakfast every day.
Cornflakes?
Not because it was ideal, but because the breakfasts were amazing at every hostel and hotel, but it was too early to hit them up. And so that's kind of all that was around. And so I just kind of shoved down the cornflakes. Not ideal. Nothing I'd have done at any other race. But it was there and we had it. And I didn't want anything too sugary, because you're supposed to stay low glycemic the morning before.
Right. So I know this is mostly for the first marathon downhill, then it goes uphill quite a bit.
Yeah.
And then has a little bit of a descent, then back up right before mile 40, and then pretty much downhill again, going to another body of water, which I think is the ocean.
That is the Red Sea.
Okay, so yeah.
Again, like these days, you wake up and think I get to go run to another world of wonder where we got to see Saudi Arabia from coast. The profile was challenging. It wasn't the worst. What was crazy was the sand. And just the kind of twisty, turny terrain through the desert, rocky in many places. So when there was a hill or a descent, you're navigating rocky, sandy road. That slows you down quite a bit. To say the least, I was not worrying about pacing in those middle stretches at all. Like, coach tells me to not even look at my watch at that.
But do you feel like you need like hiking poles for some of this?
Some people would have. I didn't see any out there. Other people would have definitely. I mean, this was as gnarly as it gets. I think another component was that there was you weren't running on a road or trail through a lot of it. You were just kind of like running through the desert, and you'd run up to another arrow, and then the arrow would point you in another direction. You'd run there. It was just like running through the desert.
So is this the inaugural Ultraman Israel?
No, they've got a wonderful history. They did it like a bandit run one year. The first year it was planned because it was canceled for something safety related, I forget. And so a lot of them just did it anyway on their own. And then that's the genesis of the race as it exists today. And all those original guys are still out there. I believe this is the third official year.
Okay. So you're running on pieces of land that probably haven't been walked on in many, many years by many other people. So what you're seeing is pretty fresh. Like, no one has really seen this piece of land, really.
Yeah. Well, more remarkable, I think, is that because we had thinned out with other runners, if Molly and Chris dropped back for something or the car couldn't make it in that part of the desert, I could look around me 360 and see no sign of man.
Wow.
Except their arrow up ahead. It was wild, and it's you don't run quite as fast when you're not entirely sure where the course is. So that was crazy.
Wow. So for the run, you're obviously wearing shoes, socks, and I think you wore just a sports bra and some shorts. That's it?
Yeah, I started with a little jersey, my favorite little Wadi Yankro jersey, because it was a little cooler in the morning. But then it stripped. It got hot late. So I like a bare midriff to get a breeze.
Okay. So as you're at the start line, getting ready for the start of day 3, do you have any pain, blisters, or anything like that?
Yeah, I had 2 blisters from the day before.
Really?
Yeah. So I thought, well, that could, all these things, it's like that could be the end of the race right there. 2 blisters starting a 52-mile run through the desert, that could end my race. No problem. Like, my screaming quads, that could end my race. Don't know. Me getting lost, that could end my race, And so it's just so funny. A blister would freak you out in the race. I was kind of like, oh, well, we'll see what happens. And I just bandaged those up and started, and they ended up fine. I mean, they were like raw when I took my shoes off at the end, but I didn't feel it.
Did you pop or not pop?
The blisters?
Yeah.
Oh, bleeding by the end, for sure.
No, before day 3 started, did you pop them or did you leave them?
No, I didn't. I don't attend to them in any way, so I don't even know.
Because I know for some people, it's like, if I have a blister, I'm going to pop it. But some people, I'm just going to like devour it, take it all off, or just put this little pad around it, then tape it up. Like, everybody has their own little way of doing with it. So,
well, the other thing here is, again, if I was racing domestically, you'd probably have all that stuff with you, but we were pretty limited in what we had with us, so just bandage them up a little and go.
Okay. So, as you're getting ready for this right here, what was your nutrition plan for the run?
Pretty similar to the bike, which is just kind of eat whatever you can every 45 minutes, but much more gel oriented. I actually didn't eat a lot of gel on the bike, but on the run, you don't want that many solids. And so, or you don't know what you want later. The other major difference is now that it's day 3, now I can start abusing caffeine. Like, it's on. Because, in an Ironman, you can caffeine all day because it doesn't matter if you sleep that night. But in an Ultraman,
you need to sleep.
You need to sleep. So you can't be relying on caffeine the first 2 days. And so, Terry, I waited first half marathon. And then I was like, I can wait more. And then I think it was like mile 20, 24 or something, where Molly or Chris said, what do you want next? I was like, I think I'll take Coke in the next bottle. And that Coke was like, oh. I was like running through the desert, high as a kite. I was detoxed basically. So then the gels and the caffeine started to come on pretty strong. That helped.
Wow. So to kind of back up a little bit before the caffeine, you get out on the run course. How were miles 1 through 10?
Just so much fun. What's hard with 52 miles, any long distance runner knows, is you have to not go fast. So coach gives me a tight window, says keep it in here. And I just kept eagle eye on my watch, kept it in there. I didn't have a lot of company. You don't want to race with someone who's going out fast. You don't want to worry about anyone behind you. So I just stuck to my numbers, and I felt fine. I felt great, relatively,
Wow. So what numbers were you looking at?
Oh, 8. Heart rate, and adjusting for if there's a little downhill. Very sandy though, so I had to adjust a little bit there. I didn't want to run off the front at the start. There was still a pretty big group, and there were some people only doing that run. So I stayed in the back for like 200 meters, and then I thought, all right, well, I gotta start at some point. And so I pulled around, and then they were laughing at me in Hebrew. They were saying something. They were daring their buddies to go me or something. And I looked at one dude and gave a look. I knew he didn't speak English. It was kind of like, "Do you want to run with me? Do you want to fake off the front, pretty much?" And it wasn't that fast. It was like, I don't think we got even down to a 7:30 mile. But we left the group then. I never saw anyone again except for one or two dudes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So there's like literally no aid stations here on the bike course.
They on the run course, they actually had a few. It was awesome.
Okay. Because I was basing this off of other Ultraman races that I've talked with, and it's really just self-supported the whole way.
Totally. I self-supported this whole run. They had some out there just because they're so great. It was like out of the kindness of their heart. And then Hoka One set up the halfway point for a cool little Hoka station.
Really?
At the marathon. That was really cool. Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
So I never took any.
Wow.
That's just me.
So this isn't like a bigger Ironman event or even like a marathon where you have Sherpas, spectators, volunteers galore. This is, you're running through a desert and nobody's around you. You're not really allowed to use music here, from what I understand. So
yeah, it's very boring.
So you have to literally be comfortable in your own mind, because you're coming up on roughly 18 solid hours of just in your own mind.
Yeah.
You have to be extremely comfortable with this. How did you get to where you are now mentally with this stamina of just being comfortable?
Race day magic helps, and being in Israel. I mean, everything was so wild, and you'd see maybe like gazelles or a landmine sign or a checkpoint, that helped break things up on that day. But the training, those long runs, is way hard.
What do you mean?
Like solo long run trains, mentally, like a 5-hour run that I did for training leading up to the race.
5-hour long run.
Yeah, those are so much harder because there was no race day stimulation.
Is that like on a treadmill?
I did one on a treadmill.
You're telling me you did a 5-hour treadmill run?
Oh God, it was so hard. It was so hard. I did an 8-hour ride on the trainer too on my bike. That's the hard shit.
Cody Bills, he's a Canadian, and he did a marathon on the treadmill because he had a 40K run. He was like, you know what, I'll just do 2 more, make it a marathon. But 5 hours on a treadmill, that's nuts. How far was that for you? That's like 45 miles?
No, because I was doing an altitude run too. And then I had a 4-hour run in Colorado, and my brother was there for part of it. And even that feels like the hardest run I did this year, mentally, we're talking. This 53 mile run in Israel, getting back to that, everything was so wild and crazy. I had just had the most epic bike day of my whole entire life ever. Molly and Chris were out there, and they ran with me for parts of it. So this one relatively flew by.
Okay. So what was epic about this run that you're talking about?
Well, one cool thing, much like the other days, is the whole time you're running to somewhere cool. Like the whole day I'm like, I'm running to the Red Sea. But it wasn't a straight shot. They veered you off to the desert, these circuitous loop with arrows pointing here and there and rock formations on every side. And it was just wild. Then we ended up and descended, and there's new terrain with all of these date trees, which are like all of the really parallel and straight palm trees in a line for all the date harvesting. And then ultimately, I'm going to end up at the Red Sea on this beach, this Las Vegas like beach town. Super exciting.
Wow. So whenever you actually see the rock formations, what are you actually seeing? Because I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, you mentioned the Grand Canyon. It was like Moab Grand Canyon arches type thing, only sandy colored, not red. Very coyote and roadrunner type territory. Very sandy underfoot. And then the most thrilling part was when, if Molly and Chris weren't there, and I would look around and see no signs of humanity in any direction. That's pretty different than any other race I've ever done.
Wow. So as far as the run goes from miles 11 through the marathon halfway point, before you actually get to the hilly part, well, this is downhill, but before you get to the hills, what is this like for you? This is point to point, so are you leaving the desert, further into the desert? What is this like?
Every time I thought I was leaving the desert, we went to the desert. There was always desert on until really, I'd say 3 miles to go. I mean, this was one big sandy run. But I'll tell you, if there was a part where you're thinking, whoa, this is sandy and up rocky and up over this little hill, you can have to like walk a little bit. When I thought that was tough, I would think, yo, you know who's about an hour behind me right now? That's Andre. And he's not even in his cycling chair. He's in his upright, or his running wheelchair. And I think he's got to get up and over this on wheels. Like, it just, reminds you that you can do anything. He's out there. It's pretty inspiring.
Wow. So was any of this run on a road?
Yeah, a little towards the end. Not much. I would say a couple miles.
So mostly for 98% of this was through the desert.
Yeah, there were a couple of kind of paved driveways through the desert because there was a tourist site in there. That was really nice. Forgot about those. I don't know, 80%.
Oh, wow. So
80% sand, I'd say.
Okay, so after you hit the marathon point, this is usually whenever most races stop. And then you have to keep going. How are you holding up mentally for it?
It so dwarfs it to be at mile 26 and think you're only halfway. It's so crazy. But there's 2 ways that can go. It can either be rough because a runner went out too fast, or it can be totally attainable because the runner listened to her coach and stayed hydrated and fueled. And you still feel okay. I mean, that's black or white right there. And I was lucky because at that point, Chris was running with me too. Probably painfully slow for him, but I was lucky for that.
So how much of the run did he run with you?
Crew members can run fewer than 20K at any given time with a racer. So Chris did a stint and then Molly did a stint.
So he was actually able to run through this desert and experience this with you.
Yeah, there are no pictures from the craziest parts. And at one point, it was just me and Chris, this couple running through the desert. And we're like, where are we? Can someone take a picture of us right now, running, talking about where we're staying that night or something? It was, that was a great couples experience.
What was the most talked about thing besides where you were going?
That. We were talking about how crazy it was right then and there. And then every couple of miles, I'd say to them, remember yesterday when I had to ride 100 miles with tutors? This day was turning into celebration towards the end of the run. It was increasingly making that turn. And once you start to creep up, realizing you're going to make it, it's just, you start to get happier.
Wow. So as you're approaching miles 40, how's the fatigue levels? Are you cramping? Any GI issues? You're already going to caffeine. You've been at caffeine for nearly 30 miles at this point.
Yeah.
How is all this settling with you?
I started off major gut issues of the run that day. I was expecting that. Happens to me a lot. I control it with Imodium. But I don't want to be graphic, but I would stop every few miles and take a little time. For about 20 miles, But then I was done. I was fine from there on out. My joke was, I said, everyone, I am ready for my colonoscopy. So, should I need one right now? I am ready. I think the caffeine helped with my leg fatigue. And I gotta tell you, I mean, other than having hurty legs, just because it was, 40 miles into a run, I was golden. I felt great.
Wow. How were the blisters?
They held up. I mean, as I said at the finish line, I took off my shoes. I was like, oh, God, that's horrible. But they held. It was fine.
Wow.
Everything was great.
So, as you're approaching miles 45 and then 50, you're still in the desert. You're getting onto a little bit of road here. Did you realize how much of a lead you had over pretty much everybody?
Chris and Molly started to tell me. So I could start to see some guy in the back. He hung with me for most of the miles, somewhere back in the desert. Here and there I could see him, but he was not, he wasn't as competitive the days prior. And so I knew the guy who was in first place. They gave me an update and said, by the way, you're gaining on him, and you're already a half hour ahead of him or something. So I knew I could probably win the whole thing if I kept it under control. That was fun, that was exciting.
Wow. So as far as the run goes, what are some tips that you'd actually give someone that hasn't done this course before?
In Israel?
Yeah.
Probably to wear, gaiters like your friend did, to just know how much sand there is, and that will affect person's strategy in terms of pacing.
Okay.
Because the way to get through a 52-mile run, whether it's flat on the road or hilly or whatever, is pacing, right? Or whatever that means for you, pacing or heart rate or speed, whatever.
Being mindful of your effort.
Being mindful of your effort and looking at numbers, making sure you don't go out too fast. This one in particular, the footing and the circuitous nature of just the path, the course, are another component that I think is advice worthy for this race.
What about wildlife? Did you have to worry about wildlife at all?
No, I always wondered, what would we see? We saw either gazelles or ibexes or something. But there wasn't much out there.
But no, like, reptiles?
I saw some lizards.
Okay.
Might have hallucinated some dragons, but...
Well, I was mainly referring to, like, snakes or turtles or stuff like that, because that's like, if you see a desert tortoise, you're not even supposed to touch it.
Oh.
Yeah, because apparently as soon as you touch a desert tortoise, they pee all over themselves, which dehydrates them, and then
I'm so glad I didn't touch one. I did see a turtle.
Really?
Oh, little guys.
Yeah, I know that because when we were in Afghanistan, like, it's such a big thing, and if you see it, like, they have to mark the area, make sure nobody goes near it, and all. It's annoying. Oh. So, as you get closer and closer to the finish line here, how was the last mile? Were they pacing with you?
No, because they wanted to drive up the finish line. But I looked at my watch and it already read mile 52, and there was no sign of finish line anywhere. And so we were going back through these date trees, these fields, and I was thinking, are we even on course anymore? My watch said 52 miles back there, and it's only Ultraman, it's not like Ironman where you can hear,
the finish line from miles away.
Yeah, and you can hear the music and the announcer and see his big arch and the lights. Like, this is a 30-person race, and so and I'm the first. Well, there was another guy in the running race who was ahead of me, but I'm the second person in, and so it's quiet. But I finally saw a parking lot. Chris and Molly had already driven up, and then I saw the arch. I was like, okay, there it is, fine. And then they were so great at the finish line. They popped this little confetti thing, had the banner, and I was all smiles. There was the Red Sea right there in front of me, and these huge ships. It was crazy.
Like, this isn't like a big finish shoot like a lot of people envision. Like, I saw the finish line online, and it was just like here's the first inflatable, here's the second inflatable with this tape,
Yep.
and 3-4 people around-ish?
4 people? Yeah.
Like, that was it.
That's what my dad said. He was like, where was your crowd? No one cared that you finished. But you gotta this race spreads out with such a big spread of athletes from front to end at that point. There are only, 4 or 5 race logistics coordinators, because you can't pay a huge crew of volunteers or anything. This is a 4-day adventure. You know, volunteers don't like ride with you all 3 days. So there are only like 4 or 5 of these guys, and then my friend Oron's 2 sons. And so they have to be at the start, in the middle, and at the Hoka station, and manning, taking down flags and stuff. And so the finish line, there are only so many personnel from the race who can be. So that's another reason.
Wow.
And all the family and crews are with their runners behind me.
Right. So, did you realize that you won?
Yeah, I knew at that point.
Wow. Did they like say, hey, you actually won the whole thing? Or,
Yeah.
because this isn't like a male and female division race like most athletes are used to. This is a athlete race.
Yeah,
like,
I know.
All together.
Well, and a couple signs indicated to me that it's not a male and female race aren't those divisions, because they just, they would never imagine that a woman would win overall, I believe. And so I did see some looks of surprise, but I made a lot of friends, and a lot were so great. And I had a fun finish line. I had a Corona with Molly, and we dipped our feet in Red Sea. It was great.
Wow. So after you finished, I'm sure you changed again and got a shower. Then you came back to the finish line to cheer on other people. What was this like?
I stayed at the finish line because the hotel at this point was too far away. You couldn't go there and come back, really.
Really?
It was just kind of logistically, and it's unlike Ironman, where you can watch the finish and people are coming in. It actually doesn't make that much sense to watch an Ultraman finish line, because it's like, wait for an hour, and someone could be walking out there. And so it's not really, like, I love doing that just in terms of morale at Ironman races, but it doesn't make sense for Ultraman. So I waited for the next 2 people to come in.
Right, which was 10 minutes and then an hour and 21 minutes behind you.
Yeah, those guys.
And the one that was 10 minutes behind you was a relay team.
Oh, yeah.
And then in an hour and 21 minutes was the first place male.
Male.
The second place overall.
Okay. I'm kind of forgetting. Well, and it's so cool because it's on a beach in a cool, like, where tourists would go. And you look out there and you can see a couple other countries and these huge ships, and it's just and you also get chills because other people coming through and finishing, like, this is the end of our journey, you know, crying, and really, really special. And they don't need to worry about the next day anymore.
Right. So after this, how was your recovery process?
I was partying for a couple of days.
So no recovery, just enjoy it.
Just enjoying it. Molly said, can we finally hang out? Instead of you just going to bed early. So we had fun that night. It was a really nice hotel. And then the next day, and then we started sightseeing. We did the tourism thing for like 3 days afterwards. So that was awesome.
Wow. So where all did you see? I know y'all went everywhere, basically. Y'all saw a lot of graffiti?
Yeah, Chris loves taking pictures of graffiti. There is a lot of great. The next day we drove back over the bike course, and we got to go to the Dead Sea, which was a trip. And then the following day, the next day was a wonderful award ceremony, wonderful. The army was there. Even more crew members came out of the wood. Most people were wearing these beautiful finisher polos. It was a really special ceremony.
Wow, and they got to recognize you as the winner.
Yeah, I got a giant novelty check, which has been my lifelong dream.
Nice, and you got to bring it back home.
Yeah, I did.
How did you get it back home?
I had dreams of bringing it on the but I didn't want mass either, so I actually put it in my.
Oh, okay, man. So after you got done with the award ceremony, tourism time was there. What things in Israel did you want to make sure you saw?
Well, the cool thing is we had an official representative in the Ministry of Tourism, and so I deferred to him and said, "What should we see?" You know, this is his job, and he said, "Well, Jerusalem," and took us on a full day walking tour of everything you'd ever want to see in Jerusalem. What perfect timing, because before a race, I wouldn't want to waste a day, and I wouldn't want to walk very much, and so couldn't be better timing. But for a race, I wouldn't want to around too much or waste a day. And so after a race, just walking slowly around a city all day was kind of perfect.
Okay. So where all did y'all see? Where did y'all go see?
In Jerusalem, the three major religions all have major holy sites right there. And so it's like the biggest things went down for Catholics, right there. The biggest things for Jewish people went down right there. The biggest things for Muslims. And so that was cool. All of the sites, like where Jesus walked, the Wailing Wall.
What's the Wailing Wall?
It's this, I shouldn't know, something major happened there, and it's where everyone goes and rolls up a little scroll with their prayer to God and tucks it in the crevices of the bricks. And there was a section for women to go pray.
Oh wow!
And yeah, and it was breathtaking. You know, lots of practicing and swaying and crying. Faithful people. It was quite the spectacle. Very impactful.
So, what did you actually see that was astonishing to you being in Israel that you've never been before, and this is something that is a once in a lifetime experience?
Yeah, I would say, and that's why I really was to get that once in a lifetime experience. This might be a redirect, but it was like looking at all of those sites, the big temples and the wall and all of the, there are thousands and thousands of marble tombs. It wasn't so much any of those given sites. It's that as you're navigating there, to your left might be a whole group of women in hijabs with only their eyes showing. To your left might be like loads of Orthodox Jewish family who are apparently so based on their dress. And meanwhile, all around us are young women and men in uniform, packed with huge rifles on their backs.
Really?
Everywhere. Guns everywhere. And so it's not so much the sights, it was seeing that with all of that humanity around you that was both timeless and a reminder of the present situation in the Middle East.
Like the contrast of what you see and people observing and what they're doing versus the war right here is trying to be prevented at the same time.
Exactly. I mean, you've got people, they're dressed as they could have 100 years ago. And then you've got an 18-year-old with a rifle and, scooting you out of the way. It's wild.
Oh, I mean, I kind of saw some of that compare and contrast in Afghanistan where people were living in mud huts with no electricity, going to the well for water still. And yet then you have I'm over here in this $1.4 million truck rolling around their city.
Yeah, exactly.
You literally travel back in time.
Yeah, exactly. It's just wild.
So looking back on it, how well prepared for this race do you feel like you were?
I think I was just fine physically. Could have done a couple tweaks here and there.
What would you have done then?
I would have done one more long ride and one more. But it worked out in the end, and I ended up not, majorly bonking or anything. So that's debatable. What I wasn't prepared for was the wild culture, and I don't know what preparation I could have done or how it would have changed my experience, but I just I didn't realize that this trip, the race was only one pit. It was a great avenue to seeing most of the country and meeting some awesome people, but our adventure comes from our whole 3 weeks there and everything we saw.
So, looking back on it, do you feel like the DNF at Louisville emotionally hurt you going into this race?
Maybe. I just, I hate DNFing, loves it. But I worried because we had wove Louisville into the for training. I worried I was missing that. But don't forget, in the middle of my race, my derailleur was broken, and I didn't care about how finely tuned my training was. I just cared about survival that week.
Right.
And we had already had so many adventures that at that point, the trip, I mean, of course, it's still well worth it anyway. So that took a lot of the pressure off.
So, as far as first timers that are going to do this race in the future, what advice would you give them?
So there are two parts to that. One is a first timer doing his first Ultraman, versus an Ultraman person doing that race for his first time. For the former, any new Ultra person, my advice is always going to be about how to protect yourself the evenings after day 1 and 2. That's where I see a lot of variation. And what I've learned is that day 1, you finish the finish line. It's not party time. It's time for you to get dry and fed. It's a race to bed. Same with day 2. So those are my little bits of advice for first Ultraman. For someone who's done an Ultraman and wants to go to Israel, do it. You have to be more autonomous and prepare yourself for more parents than Canada, Florida, Hawaii, I'm guessing anywhere else. But that's going to be another step in the adventure. And I certainly felt like that upped the game for sure.
Right, because you don't really have good cell phone reception. It's not like you can get on Wi-Fi. You have to know the roads. You have to know everything. And then you're living out of a backpack, and your Sherpas are living out of a backpack.
Yeah.
And you're literally living out of a car.
It's basically like everything. If someone had done an Ultraman, everything she or he learned from the first one, do that, and then there's more.
Right.
It's nuts.
Man. Well, VT, we covered a lot about this race. What else do you want to add?
Ultraman is about the crew, and we pointed out those times when you show them your all and you have to rely on them for everything. Very cathartic, very difficult, very life-changing. Israel is a place where people are stridently proud about their country, and not only do they embrace difficulty and challenge, but they incorporate into every day. They're proud of that as well. That's part of their pride. They're, a man said, "This is Israel. Everything is challenging." That's what they love. They love that it's a tough course. They live with adversity on every border. They live with treacherous landscape, and that is the theme that I walk away with. And it gave me, every Ironman is going to give you perspective. Certainly every Ultraman. This whole trip and race gave me perspective that will last the rest of my life.
Wow, that is awesome. So just to kind of wrap everything up here, what's next for you?
Great question. Chris and I are doing just a tiny little half man this weekend. It's going to be over in like 4.5 hours, 5 hours. So we're going to end out the year with Indian Wells and new WTC 70.3 in Palm Springs. And then it's 2019, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're going to come up with a plan.
So do you have anything nailed down next year that you for sure want to do?
I for sure don't want to do an Ultraman. I don't want to do an Ultraman. It takes too much away from Ironman. But most importantly, I don't want to do an Ultraman because the next time I'm around that genre of racing, I will be crewing for someone instead of asking someone else to sacrifice their days for me.
Wow. It seems like with Ultraman, you have this going trend of, whether on the run or the bike, having that mental breakdown. Because on the run, the first time you were sitting on the ground crying, and then with this one, it was on the bike.
Yeah, right. I guess it's a miracle if you don't have that at some point in Ultraman. I guess I don't know anyone who hasn't. Chances are just so much greater. I mean, chances are pretty high in any Ironman. Something won't go right. Ultraman's 3 days of that, you know, like chances are. And when your fatigue starts to couple with adversity, it gets real inside your bum. And so it is like a huge, very expensive taxing therapy session.
Right. So I don't know if I asked you this last time. You can just tell me if I did. But what races are on your bucket list?
Oh, I did say I've always been intrigued by those super long, gnarly, like Norseman type thing. A lot of those are too cold for me. And so my next bucket list would just to be do a regular old Ironman, but somewhere really another new, different, exotic place that's hopefully hot.
Okay. So being that I already know what your definition of a perfect race is and all of this fun stuff, I don't really have a concluding question to ask, to be completely honest. This is your third time on here. So
well, then maybe we can change things up and I can ask you for a concluding question.
Okay. Go ahead.
You can ask the interviewer. Terry, if you ever did an Ultraman, do you know anyone who'd be a perfect crew member for you?
Oh, my. Man. Like, how many people could be in my crew? Two. Oh, my.
Remember that they have to go too.
Gosh. I mean, my first instinct would be you and Chris. And then...
Sign us up.
No, oh, you mean me sign up? I see what you did there. But then my next impression would be Rich Reed and Morgan Lattimore. They're both people that I interviewed for their Ultraman at Florida this year, and they already know each other. I know they get along well, and I know that Morgan being a Marine, I know he would do the exact same thing what Molly did to you. Hey man, you got this. Roll the window back up. Man, he ain't got this at all. Like I know he would do that. Like I know that fake laughter would be there for him. Like so I could see that personality coming out. But then being that me and Morgan are both veterans, I feel like that emotional tie of man, look, this shit's really fucking hard right now. I need you to just cut the shit and be real with me.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that would be a little bit layered deep. And I feel that with a few people that I've interviewed, and that's pretty awesome. I mean, you would be one of them. You've been on here 3 times. I've gotten to spend like 6 hours with you. It's pretty freaking awesome.
Well, for the record, should those other guys not come, I will be here for you indefinitely.
So you're saying I should do an Ultraman now?
If it comes up.
If it comes up along the way somewhere. Well, Amy, it's been great. I've enjoyed this long conversation about Ultraman. This has been awesome. Thank you so much for spending some more time with me. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Terry.
You're welcome. Have a good day, okay?
You too.
Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you were able to learn something from today's episode. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to leave a review on iTunes or share it with a friend. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you'd like to see pictures from this athlete's race, learn more about who I am, what I'm doing, or be on the show yourself to share your story, check out my website at CoachTerryWilson.com. Until next time, continue the pursuit.